The story begins with our main protagonist, called Takeshi Nanase. The tense atmosphere at home makes him leave the house while wishing he'd rather be anywhere than at home. While walking to school with Isashima Kurumi, his girlfriend, she expresses her concerns about his sour relationship with Geku, his brother, but Takeshi isn't ready to make up. Before entering the dojo, he sees a girl suddenly collapse, so he quickly takes her to the nurse's office. As it is early, he doesn't find any staff to help him out. The girl suddenly hugs him, crying and referring to him as her brother. She kicks him after finding out Takeshi isn't her brother and then asks how she got to the school. She suddenly collapses again and locks lips with Takeshi accidentally. This makes her fire shots at him before composing herself as it was an accident. She then introduces herself as Aba Mui, and as they talk, Takeshi notices a red butterfly which Mui quickly shoots. She explains it is a scout bug, but before she can move to safety, her brother appears. She begs him to stop, but he argues that he isn't her brother. She tries to explain that he got his memories rewritten by a group called Ghost Trailer Faction, but he doesn't buy it. Just then, Hataru, Oigami, and Ashiwaka come in, addressing her brother as Suganashi. When they try to run, Suganashi blocks the window with ice magic, so Mui reminds him he might lose his magic if he attacks her. Oigami decides to handle the situation with his weapon, but to his surprise, Takeshi takes out his wooden sword. They begin clashing blades, but Takeshi is surprisingly the first to land a hit. This makes Oigami get serious and damages Takeshi's sword. Just then, Takeshi sees a glimpse of the future, so he dashes at Oigami's attack and sends his weapon in the direction of their blocked path. This allows them to escape, and afterward, Suganashi surmises that Takeshi is an evasive magician just like Oigami. Later, Mui explains that she can't leave Takeshi and apologizes for turning him into a magician. She explains that her early shots made him a magician and that her brother got involved with the Ghost Trailers, a group that is not comfortable with magicians being treated with contempt in the human world, and how they live by hiding their existence from normal people. Just then Isashima finds them, but so does Oigami and Ashiwaka. Oigami requests a rematch since they are both evasive magicians who can evade all forms of attack. Ashiwaka then moves to retrieve Mui, but Isashima interferes. This makes him use his magic powers on them. Soon he gets his powers drained since a spell called the Gift prevents magicians from attacking each other in the human world. When Isashima finds out she has been hit, this triggers her magic powers and makes her grow bigger. As she panics, Mui explains she has transformation magic, which is a form of corporeal magic. Just then, Ida arrives with an unconscious Hataru in tow. He too suddenly awakens destruction fire magic, and the ridiculous situation playing out makes Oigami charge at Takeshi. Takeshi's magical eyes also activates, so he easily evades all of Oigami's moves. Oigami then decides to handicap him, but Mui charges an attack that creates a light screen, making Takeshi land his finishing move successfully. Afterward, Mui takes them through a mirror that leads them to the ruined world, a world for magicians. Mui takes them to Subaru Magical Academy, where Isashima is treated. They all go to meet the headmistress, who introduces herself as Shiju Momoka. She explains that in 1999, a year before they were born, a powerful magician called Ryusenji Kazuma led the Ghost Trailers into a full-scale war with an army of like-minded factions of magicians, which included the Wizard Brace and 6 others. Kazuma tried to eradicate humanity using a spell, but was stopped by 15 magicians who divided the world into 2. As a result, only the ruined world continued to be affected by the spell, while the human world was spared. After her explanation, she reveals they can either stay at the academy and learn magic or go back to the human world but lose their magic. On the assurance that the Ghost Trailers won't attack the academy, Takeshi, Ida, and a reluctant Isashima decide to stay behind. In their new class, they are asked to activate their ancestral magic by using aspects to focus their magic powers. However, Takeshi is the only one without an aspect. The teacher then asks Mui to help him choose one from the shop. In the shop, they meet Kadu, who helps him choose a katana. It turns out the sword was used by one of the legendary magicians of the Wizard Brace faction, and has a magic circle on it. When Mui reminds Kadu it might be dangerous to use the sword, he attacks Takeshi in all seriousness until the magic circle activates and begins synchronizing with him. Since Takeshi is a novice magician, he has his magic drained before almost collapsing. Afterward, Kadu hands him some bullets to load into the sword to allow him use other people's magic. The next day, everyone from Takeshi's class watches as they struggle to control their magic abilities. Meanwhile, Geku, Takeshi's brother in the human world, asks their mother about his well-being. He recalls how he and Takeshi were close siblings until he betrayed him by dating Isashima, who he loved. During the confrontation, he got involved in an accident and he blamed it on Takeshi as well. Mui then goes to a fortune teller who reveals the whereabouts of her brother to her, so she secretly leaves the school to search for him again. Finding out, Isashima informs the group, who then go to meet the teacher for help. However, it is revealed nothing can be done as the headmistress is away. The 3 sneak behind some seniors who they follow into the portal to the ruined world. They meet the gatekeeper, who asks them to go back as Miui didn't pass through her box. Just then, they witness the gruesomeness of the ruined world's magical war and Aisashima is scared. However, Takeshi still leads his friends into hell. Miui meets her brother who, as usual, fights her with no recollection of her. When he grabs her, she finally triggers a memory of his past, but Suganashi is quick to ignore it and renders her unconscious. On arrival, Takeshi confronts him for treating his sister badly. This time, he freely uses his ice magic to attack, and even though Takeshi can see a glimpse of the future, his body can't keep up. He makes an ice cage, but Ida jumps into it to save Takeshi. He then continues his battle with Suganashi barely able to stand, and at the same time, Ida begins suffocating. Suganashi activates his finishing spell of ice rocks, so Takeshi uses it to his advantage and sets Ida free. Takeshi puts up a weak barrier that easily gets destroyed by Suganashi. As a last resort, Takeshi tries to activate his sword cartridge, so Miui and Aisashima protect him from the ice barrage. Ida tosses him an enhanced bullet which he loads in and becomes a fire user. He uses the flaming sword to melt Suganashi's ice and knocks him down. As the dust settles, a new enemy called Washizu Kippe shows up and takes Suganashi away. At the end of the semester, evasive magic students are assembled to begin a test in a city conjured through illusion magic. Inside, they are faced with spiders equipped with machine guns. Takeshi finds Oigami, so he asks what he wants. However, Oigami's memories had been altered, so he behaves like a regular student with no collection of Takeshi. During the test, Takeshi is forcefully warped away by black magic. As a result, Aisashima is faced with danger, but Oigami comes to her aid. Aisashima is shocked to see him, but as she explains how they previously fought against each other, he gets teleported due to his injuries. Takeshi and his friends meet up and begin heading for the goal of the test. On their way, they encounter a golem that sends Takeshi flying, and Miui's lightning attack doesn't affect it due to its magical enhancement. The girls begin distracting it, and when it goes to attack, Ida protects them. This allows Takeshi to load his magic bullet, which he uses to incinerate the golem. Meanwhile, it turns out the disturbance was caused by the teacher Violet, who is secretly aiding the ghost trailers. After training, Takeshi notices Miui has a fever, so he takes her to her dorm. Here, she mistakes him for her brother and forces him to cuddle her. Unfortunately, Aisashima comes in to meet them in an awkward situation. She gets angry and begins crying, accidentally activating her transformation magic, which shrinks her into a child. When Miui goes to make Takeshi reconcile with Aisashima, he reveals he doesn't want to, as they were only faking the relationship. The next term, the headmistress assembles a retrieval team for Suganashi. On arrival at the ruined world, Momoka proposes an exchange between her group, the Wizard Brace, and the Ghost Trailers. It turns out Oigami and Hataru were kept alive to be exchanged for Suganashi. With Momoka and Washizu going into a separate space, the group must confront Suganashi alone. Luckily, Nanami assists them so that when he attacks, she creates a water wall to block off the icicles. Two students conjure a device intending to trap him inside a hole, but he comes out and easily puts them out of commission. It turns out Momoka and Washizu are former acquaintances, so she hopes to settle a past score with him. They begin using advanced magic on each other, and when Momoka doesn't flinch, Washizu reminds her his powers allow him to melt anything he gazes upon with time. They switch to using their weapons and spells simultaneously, but both parties can only counter each other. Next, she creates a three-way spell so that when he avoids the first two, he falls for the one that drags him into a box that explodes. Shortly after, he emerges from the river with little to no scratch and reveals he figured out her trick. Meanwhile, Washizu's spell begins damaging her slowly as the clock ticks. When Washizu reveals that she fears that Kazuma's awakening will bring her secret deeds to light, Momoka activates a spell that begins sucking everything into a black hole. Although he struggles, he gets sucked in just before his spell finishes off Momoka. At the other end, the group arrives at an ice castle conjured by Suganashi. When Ida tries to open a path, he activates traps from all directions. Ida then hands Takeshi his fire bullet, but when he loads it, it explodes. Takeshi goes to retrieve his sword but gets his arm frozen along with it. Miui then goes alone to confront her brother. She tells him she has been lonely without him, but he replies by firing at her. Before he can end her, Takeshi and Ida arrive in a fountain of flames. This time, her words reach him deep down, so his head gets disoriented. Miui quickly loads her gun with a binding bullet to restrain him. When she wakes up, Suganashi has returned to his usual self at the academy. Meanwhile, Washizu managed to escape from Momoka's black hole. When introduced to Suganashi's replacements, he kills them all and reveals he already has a chosen candidate. In a void of clouds, Takeshi finds Miui running towards a giant pudding. She falls before she gets to it, and Takeshi wakes up from the dream terrified. He finds Suganashi, who reveals that since he has been having nightmares, they might be caused by magic. The next day, he finds Miui has injured her leg. Isashima explains she fell from the stairs while rushing to get puddings. This disturbs Takeshi, so he collapses. He is forced to sleep by Nanami, and when he does, he has visions of Washizu and a strange girl. On noticing his situation, Nanami wakes him up forcefully. She explains that his sword called Twilight is the cause of his nightmares, and it is also using his magic powers to manifest in human form without his consent. At night, he dreams of Twilight while she sucks him off his magic in the real world. So the next day, Momoka gives him the option of either letting go of the sword or battling Twilight in his dreams for supremacy. Afterward, he is prepared to sleep while Momoka helps transport Miui into his dreams. Still in his dream, he encounters his mother and then Geku, who attacks him. He uses the fallen angel's blade to create a blizzard, so Takeshi goes to protect Miui. Just then, he encounters Twilight, who transforms her identical sword into a form called Wizard Slayer. This allows her to steal her opponent's powers so that when Miui interferes, it sucks in her barrier. She then attacks Miui and begins draining her magic slowly. Moving on to Takeshi, she overpowers him and also begins stealing his magic. As he struggles, he recalls Momoka's advice. He figures something out and then apologizes to Twilight. He decides to rename her Eterna, and so she submits her all to him. The next session in the academy, Ida's sister Futaba resumes with him. Geku's arrival startles Takeshi, but he tries to hide it. Some days later, when they encounter each other in the bath, Takeshi is disturbed by Geku's scar from the accident, so he remains silent. Geku then offers to wash his back, and while doing so, he apologizes for taking out his frustration on Takeshi. Afterward, the brothers make up and begin training together. Takeshi is faced with a nightmare where he encounters an angry Geku who swears revenge on him. He wakes up terrified only to find Washizu by his window. However, Washizu reveals he only wants to talk to him. In the 8th century, the Wizard Brace faction monopolized magic and conspired with non-magicians to persecute and kill weak magicians. Because of Kazuma's talent, he was approached by Wizard Brace, but he decided not to join them as they see him only as a tool. The official used his parents' safety to threaten him, so Kazuma gets angry and kills him in the office. His parents were also killed, and afterward, he created the Ghost Trailers as a place for people like him to belong. Washizu also confirms that Kazuma murdered countless magicians, but he argues that they were all tyrants who had it coming for their 1,000 years of oppression. When the war led by Kazuma began, Kazuma tried to kill a woman called Yauko, but she was protected at the last moment. It turns out Yauko was the welder of Twilight and also Takeshi's mother. As predicted by Violet, Kazuma awakens on June 15th and immediately signals the start of the second wave of the Magician War. The next day in class, chaos suddenly strikes, and outside, they find a red dragon. Members of Ghost Trailers who had infiltrated the school reveal themselves and begin attacking everyone on sight. Geku strikes the teacher from behind to confirm he is an enemy. At the same time, Miui is ganged up on in the hallway. As she fends them off, Suganashi arrives to protect her using his ice magic. At Momoka's office, she is confronted by another faction called Pendragon who have allied themselves with the Ghost Trailers. They activate their spells by sealing the room like a vacuum while manipulating the air inside. But this isn't enough to handle the headmistress. She reveals the loophole in their spells and breaks free from it completely. She then attacks by sucking them into her black hole. Next, she is faced with Violet, who summons a Valkyrie from her cards. While the giant Valkyrie battles Momoka, Violet switches command to the red dragon. It only takes a strike from its tail to finish the battle underwhelmingly. Takeshi and Isashima find Geku, but his magic eye called Strike Vision makes him realize Geku is an enemy. Geku then reveals he joined the Trailers only to get revenge on him. He attacks Takeshi by teleporting in his blind spot, so Takeshi finds it hard to keep up with his speed. He knocks Takeshi down and stabs him from behind while expressing his disappointment in his so-called evasive magic. Geku gets serious and activates his sword, which skyrockets his speed immensely. He begins blitzing Takeshi until he is unable to move an inch. He tries and succeeds in kidnapping Isashima, whose only concern is to help Takeshi. While unconscious, Eterna shows Takeshi a glimpse of the future where Geku kills their mother. Miui stumbles on Violet trying to abduct Takeshi, so she tries to stop her. She is then faced with one of Violet's summonings, who battles her with a whip. Miui gets knocked down and is about to be finished off before she is saved by an elite trio. Afterward, the leader of the group introduces herself as Kasaki Ina from another faction. Miui also adds that she is Tsuganashi's classmate and ex-girlfriend. Takeshi wakes up in a hospital in the human world, and soon Ida comes in to complain that his sister was taken by the Magician Bureau because she is assumed to have special abilities. Washizu goes on a killing spree in the human world. Here he assassinates the magician who controls the gift spell. With the gift gone, magicians can now battle in the human world as well as the ruined world. The world is immediately thrown into chaos in the battle between the Trailers and the 7 main factions. Takeshi, accompanied by Tsuganashi and Kasaki, meet with Yauko. Here, they request for her to train Takeshi. At first, she refuses, but when she finds the content of the letter is a ring, she accepts the request. It turns out the ring allows her to use magic temporarily to train Takeshi. Takeshi begins training under the strict supervision of his mother, but in secret, she suffers as the ring drains her life force in exchange for magic powers. Isashima wakes up only to find herself looking like Takeshi. When Geku comes in, she transforms back to her normal form. She gets disgusted by his obsession and runs away from him. In the hallway, she bumps into Oigami and begs him to hide her in his room. Later, Oigami and Haruo help Isashima familiarize herself with the castle so she can make her escape. They stumble on Geku, so Haruo makes Isashima transform into her and successfully fool Geku. Outside, Washizu takes Oigami with him, so Isashima is left alone to find her way out of the maze-like castle. Meanwhile, Takeshi, Ida, and Isashima arrive at the trailer's headquarters only to find Oigami and Haruo waiting for them. Takeshi engages Oigami using a regular sword since Twilight was taken. He gets knocked down but manages to block a spell. He then creates a barrier to counter Oigami's strike. Meanwhile, Haruo gets on her high horses in her battle against Ida and Mui. However, Ida reveals he was holding back because she is cute. He then blasts her away with a single attack. When Takeshi activates his magic, Oigami does the same too. They continue their battle until Oigami's shield cracks Takeshi's sword. With Miui's help, he channels both her magic and his to break Oigami's barrier and knock him down. With no clue regarding Isashima's whereabouts, Takeshi rushes home only to find Geku and his blade dripping with their mother's blood. Geku activates Twilight, which materializes bound in chains. It attacks Takeshi and knocks him down easily, but before it finishes him off, Geku calls it off. He reveals the car incident that damaged his leg was planned by their mother to get rid of him, although she didn't tell him why. When Takeshi finally admits that the brother he once knew is gone, they both activate their spells and begin engaging each other in the sky. This time, Takeshi can react to his desired location even before Geku teleports. Just when the fight begins going in Takeshi's way, they are interrupted by an all-out confrontation between Wizard Brace and the trailers. With both sides represented, the siblings continue their battle. Geku suddenly stops and pretends to be confused by a change of heart. When Takeshi naively lets his guard down to save his brother, Geku moves to stab him, but Isashima shields him with her body. This angers Takeshi, so he finally snaps and fights with killing intent. As they battle, he sends Geku flying to the ground, and while they continue fighting, they both give in to their anger and begin losing control. Just then, Momoka arrives and casts a spell that engulfs the battlefield. Kazuma goes to heal Yako, and here he addresses her as his mother. Takeshi wakes up in a dream where he sees a younger version of his mother. He also finds the younger versions of Washizu, Momoka, Kazuma, and shockingly his brother Geku. And this brings the anime to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video. Until next time, take care.